When people show you who they are, believe them.
Chapter 3. The morning bustle began in earnest as coworkers filed into the office. We had a brief morning staff meeting, and at its conclusion, my supervisor called me into his office. "Nina, I found these fuel bid proposals I need typed so I can have electronic copies of them. This isn't priority, but I'd like it done as soon as possible," Chris said. As this came under the heading of other duties as assigned, there was nothing I could say but, "Sure, I'll get them typed for you." As I walked to my desk, thoughts of Roberto intruded once again. I was mortified, remembering my panicked reaction to his stated interest in me. A woman of my age and maturity should have responded with more dignity. But then I had reason to fear. My track record with men, being what it was reason enough. Look what had happened last time a man had shown himself to be attracted to me. The beginning of the end. Sex with Ron rocked my world. Maybe it was because I'd been celibate for so long, or perhaps because I was in my early 30s, a time when experts say women hit their sexual peak. Or maybe it was the forbidden aspect of it. Whatever the reason, sex between us was shockingly good. I realized much later, because Ron was so much older than me, to him it was a matter of pride that he be a good lover. By this point, he'd celebrated his 50th birthday and needed to show the old dude still had it in him. As a Christian, I knew sex outside of marriage was a sin and had taught others, including my children, it was wrong. I wish I could say temptation overpowered me, but it would be a lie. The Bible says God will not allow any temptation to be more than we can stand and will provide a way out so we can endure. So no, the devil didn't make me do it. Ron and I had been playing around while watching television, kissing and touching. Over time, he'd been becoming more sexually aggressive, pushing my boundaries. Usually I called a halt before things went too far, but this time, I remember being really turned on, totally caught up in the long-forgotten arousal rushing through my body. Suddenly, it was like I was standing outside of myself. There was this moment of perfect mental clarity. I knew what I was doing, that it was wrong, and now was the time to decide whether to call a halt as my faith demanded or continue on this path of sin. I chose the latter. Guilt and condemnation set in as soon as it was all over, and I determined not to let it happen again. But once you give in to temptation, it's so much harder to say no to the next time. The Bible says sin is pleasurable for a season, and what we were doing felt so good. I began to rationalize reasons for continuing. Ron and I were engaged. I was positive Ron was the man God had chosen for me. In our hearts, we were already married to each other. On and on the excuses went. After we became lovers, I was no longer quite as interested in pushing off the wedding. After all, the Bible clearly says, if they burn, let them marry. Not only was I in love, I was in lust, and sleeping alone no longer held the same appeal. The first big blow-up came over the decision of where to live. Ron assumed I would move in with him. To me, it made more sense for him to move into my home. My house was larger, containing 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. It would be less of a disruption for my children. No changing schools, being able to keep their same bedrooms, friends, and surroundings. And Ron could help me finish remodeling, making my house ours. He had a 3-bedroom home he'd shared with his previous wife. One of the bedrooms had been converted into a weight exercise room. Ron didn't have a garage and refused to move his expensive weight equipment outside. I was not going to force my kids to share a room like they'd done when they were little. At the age of 7, they were getting much too old for that. We went back and forth for weeks. All talk of setting a wedding date ceased. As a Christian, I knew it was Ron's God-given responsibility to be a provider for our family, and that provision included the roof over our head. My duty was to be a submissive wife, subjugating my will to Ron's as the God-ordained head of our family on all important issues on which we couldn't agree. It sucked, but it was biblical. Finally, after much prayer and in an effort to keep peace, I told Ron we'd live with him. However, being a strong-willed Black woman giving in on the matter when I clearly knew my way made more sense, chafed. So I also warned him, "You do realize that if I move here, I'm going to make changes." "What kind of changes?" he asked, not happy with the idea at all. I could see it on his frowning face. I glanced around at the blue walls, somewhat drab furniture, and plants and trees taking up every corner. "I don't know, but if I live here, I'm going to want to put my stamp on the place." Ron looked around at the home he decorated to his preference, as though imagining it different. "I'll have to think about it. I like my place the way it is." I told him bluntly, "Look, I'm not too happy about living in a house you shared with another woman. You're crazy if you think I'm going to get rid of all my stuff and move in without changing things around. Right now, this is your house. When we're married, it will be ours." That's when I realized there was another side to Ron, one I hadn't seen before, and it was selfish. I noticed more and more things about Ron I didn't like. One was his drinking. He was what I call a social drunk. Ron never got sloppy with it or in any way appeared to be inebriated. In fact, during the work week, he didn't touch alcohol. But the minute he clocked out on Friday, continuing through Sunday evening, he was rarely without a beer in his hand. He literally went through cases of the stuff, drinking it like water. On long weekends, he always took an extra day off to give himself time to sober up. Ron's drinking habits explained why no matter how muscular he was elsewhere, he still had a gut. After the argument about our future living arrangements, we kind of cooled things somewhat. He still introduced me as his fiancée. I still went to all of his family events and supported him during times of personal crisis, like when his uncle died. He avoided my family like the plague. My family's real big on celebrating events with food. Having a birthday, we all came together at our favorite family buffet. Brought home a good report card or had some praiseworthy news, we were going out en masse. As my fiancé, Ron was invited to all of these events, but found reasons not to attend each time. I finally said something to him about it. "You know, when your family's doing something, you expect me to drop everything and come with you." "You got something against my family?" he asked, a ferocious frown on his face at the thought I might find his family lacking. Shaking my head, I explained my issue. "No. What I'm saying is that I spend time with the people important in your life, but you won't do the same with me." He was quiet. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I know I need to spend more time with your kids, and your mom is important to you as well." Ron said all the right words, but nothing changed. On another occasion, I broached the subject of his drinking. "Your drinking concerns me. My ex-husband drank a lot. It was one of the reasons for our split. I don't want to go through the same thing with you. You know, I don't drink, and I'm not too keen on the idea of my kids being exposed to it. I couldn't control what their father did, but I intended to control what went on in my home." Ron acknowledged my concern and said he'd work on cutting back on his alcohol intake, but I later discovered, inside, he was furious. Not too long afterwards, we were invited over to his brother's house for a cookout. Ron's brother lived in a rural area on the other side of town, about a half-hour's drive. I spent an enjoyable afternoon with his family, talking with my future in-laws. Ron drank, as usual, but then most of the men and quite a few of the women did too. When we left, I noticed he made sure to stick to the speed limit. I, stomach full and comfortable, didn't think much of it. When we got back to his house, he laid into me. "Did you notice how carefully I drove?" I shrugged. "No, not really." Ron, despite his tendency to speed, was a good driver. "Well, I got you here safely, didn't I? And did you notice how much beer I drank? I drank way more than I normally would, and did it prove to you I can control my alcohol and myself?" Ron pointed an accusing finger at me. "Don't ever compare me to your ex again. If I want to drink, I will. You're not my mother." I was shocked, then furious. "You mean to tell me you deliberately got drunk, putting my life and yours in danger just to prove a point?" He frowned, taken aback. "Nothing happened. I was in control at all times." I just shook my head. Ron was supposed to be the older, more mature one, and here he was acting as foolish as a child. I lost a great deal of respect for him that day. I went home and wouldn't speak to him. He finally came to me and apologized. "What I did was stupid. I do drink too much, and my conscience has been bothering me about it. That's why I was so angry when you pointed out how much I drink. I'm going to change. Not because you said something, but because I can see the effect the alcohol is having on my buddies. Their lives are falling apart, and I don't want to end up like them. I'm encouraging them to change as well." I forgave him, and things got better between us. For a time. We'd been together for over 2 years, and I'd seen so much negative. I was no longer sure marriage to Ron is what I wanted. But convinced Ron was God's choice for me, I couldn't walk away and remain in God's grace. Also, there were times when I could still see the sweet, charming man to whom I'd become engaged. Those moments gave me hope. The selfish, semi-disagreeable person he'd become was just a phase and not the real him. I wondered if Ron was going through some type of male menopause. I started referring to him in conversation by the codenames of Jekyll or Hyde, depending upon which side of his character he presented. My good friend TJ called him Sybil because she really believed he was bipolar. I no longer pushed for him to spend time with the kids. In fact, I didn't want him around my children. He'd made good on his promise to give up drinking. Unfortunately, I discovered I liked Ron better drunk.